there's something we need to talk about. You feel it too, don't you? That feeling that the official story is falling apart. The headlines don't quite add up. The explanations leave you with more questions than answers. And if you think the powers that be are only concealing truths about our present, well, you haven't seen what they've done to our past. What if I told you there are missing chapters, evidence of a lost city, hidden deep inside the Grand Canyon, and a doomsday machine, a secret Pentagon, buried inside a mountain? These aren't just theories. They are threads in a story they tried to erase. So let's look a little deeper together and pull on the first one. That first thread was pulled in 1909, and the man holding it was named G.E. Kincaid. He had spent 30 years in the field for the Smithsonian Institution, logging strata, sketching formations, filing the kind of dry reports that turned unknown country into clean lines on a map. By then, the romance of treasure hunts was for other men. His work was to notice what was real, what was natural, and what belonged where, and to write it down in language a committee in Washington could understand. That spring, he was alone on the river, prospecting for minerals, his small wooden boat riding low in the cold, fast Colorado. The canyon walls rose above him in stacked bands of red, brown, and pale stone, each layer lying exactly where his training said it should. He had seen thousands of miles of rock just like this. That was why the interruption stood out. As the boat swung around a bend, a dark mark high on the sheer wall pulled at his eye. Not a cave, not a shadow. A vertical bruise of color, dull and almost soot-like, cutting straight across the clean horizontal lines of the strata. From the river, it looked roughly rectangular, edges too crisp for a natural seep, as if something had once pressed against the stone and left a memory there. He kept his paddle in the water, letting the current carry him while he stared up. A man with less practice might have called it a trick of the light and let it go. Kincaid watched the stain slide across his field of view as the boat moved on, watched it begin to drift behind him, and felt the familiar tug-of-war start. All his plans, his supplies, his safe line of travel were down here on the water. The sensible thing was to note the anomaly in his book. Discoloration on east wall, likely mineral staining. And keep to the schedule? He could already hear the tone of the report he was expected to file. Concise, unremarkable. Nothing that would raise questions at the Smithsonian beyond funding for the next survey. But the mark on the rock did not sit with that language. 30 years in the field had taught him that when something refused to fit the words, the map itself might be wrong. He let the boat drift another few lengths. The stain slid out of sight behind a shoulder of rock. For a few seconds, the canyon returned to its usual order. River below, sky above, walls marching past as they always had. His shoulders eased. And then he felt the old, familiar unease that came whenever he walked away from an unanswered question. He dug the paddle in, turned the boat against the pull of the current, and worked his way back. This was not the kind of decision that went into the official record. It was the quiet, private one that determined what there would be to write about at all. When he finally brought the boat in against the base of the cliff and looked up, the stain was there again, waiting for him. The climb was nearly 1,400 feet straight up. The canyon offered no path, no mercy. Loose sandstone flaked away under his hands. Pebbles rattled down past his boots and vanished into the white noise of the river below. His fingers grew raw as he searched for any solid hold, knuckles scraping against protruding stone. The only sounds were the scrape of his boots against shale and his own ragged breathing. Both felt like small tears in the canyon's profound silence. The river that had filled his world a short time ago had already shrunk to a thin, shifting ribbon of silver at the bottom of the void. There was no drama in the risk, just arithmetic. This high, alone, a single missed grip or a broken foothold would end the question before it was answered, and the river would smooth over the day as if he had never left the boat. No report, no notation, just a man who failed to come back from routine fieldwork. Hours thinned out into a series of careful movements. Hand, foot, weight, breath. Sometimes his left knee throbbed where an old fall still lived under the skin, and he had to cling in place, letting the pain ebb before he reached higher. In those pauses, the doubt crept in. He thought of other cliffs he had marked, inaccessible, in the margins of his notebook, of the safe, forgettable lines that later appeared in printed Smithsonian bulletins. No discovery had ever been guaranteed. All he had, in the end, was his judgment about which questions deserved this kind of climb. The stain grew larger as he closed the distance, resolving from a mark into a band, then into something more complex he still couldn't name. Sweat stung his eyes. The ledge he was aiming for seemed to hang forever just out of reach. When he finally found a last handhold and pulled himself over the edge of the narrow ledge, his arms were shaking. He lay where he landed, cheek pressed against cool stone, letting the tremor run out of his muscles. For a while he saw nothing but dust motes drifting in the thin light and the pale surface of the sandstone inches from his eyes. Little by little, other sensations came in. The air felt different here, still, with a hint of trapped coolness that didn't match the exposed face of the cliff. Under his palm, the rock gave way to an edge that was too straight, too sharp, to be the work of wind and time. The grain beneath his fingertips was smoother in one direction, as if it had been worn by passage, not weather. He pushed himself up onto his elbows. From this close, the stain that had pulled him off the river was no longer an indistinct patch. Its color deepened toward the rock, fanning out from that unnatural edge, like residue left where something had been poured, or carried out again and again. It clung to the stone, the way smoke clings to a chimney mouth. The stain was there, but it wasn't the source, it was the byproduct. Because leading from the ledge, carved directly into the solid cliff face, were steps. Massive, perfectly chiseled sandstone steps, leading into the absolute blackness of the mountain itself. 1,400 feet up a canyon wall, a carved doorway isn't something you ignore. By the time Kincaid reached it, the idea of turning back had already gone quiet. The climb, the risk, the days of preparation, they all funneled toward this single opening in the rock. He unslung his pack with slow, economical movements, more from habit than from any lingering fatigue. The revolver came free next, heavy in his hand, its weight suddenly modest against the scale of the stone around him. He thumbed open his lantern, coaxed the wick, and struck a match. The first flare licked at the darkness, then settled into a steady flame that pushed out a small, warm circle against the deep, cold black of the passage beyond. The first steps down were like stepping out of the world. The wind from the canyon, which had been a constant presence on the climb, vanished the moment he crossed the threshold. Sound folded in on itself. All that remained was the soft crunch of his boots on worked stone and the slow, measured pull of his own breath. The air was still, cool and faintly stale, as if it had been undisturbed for a very long time. The passageway was just wide enough for a man to pass comfortably, no more. The ceiling pressed low enough that the lantern light scraped it with a dull glow. When his gloved hand brushed one wall, the stone felt cool and unnervingly uniform, as if someone had taken the irregular face of the mountain and shaved it flat. He walked for what his legs told him were only minutes, though his sense of time began to slip in the sameness. The tunnel gave him no markers, no bends, no breaks, no debris. Just the steady rhythm of his steps and the soft pool of lantern light sliding ahead. Buried inside the mountain, with tons of rock on every side, He could feel his body becoming very aware of its own smallness. Then, without warning, the floor kept going, but the world around him fell away. One more step would have sent him out into empty air. Kincaid stopped so sharply the lantern swung, casting dizzy arcs across the stone at his feet. He held the light out, arm extended. The beam reached forward, then simply disappeared, swallowed by a black that wasn't just darkness, but distance. No wall answered it. No ceiling caught and returned the glow. His ears strained for the quiet clues of a confined space. A drip, a flutter, the echo of his own breathing, and found almost nothing. His pulse climbed up into his throat. He became acutely aware of the weight of the lantern in his hand and the solid line of rock under his boots. Instinct kept him close to that edge of stone, fingers finding the wall beside him as an anchor. Whatever this was, it did not feel like the inside of a natural cave. Slowly, he swept the lantern in a wide, careful arc, letting his eyes adjust rather than chasing every shadow. The light skimmed along the curve of a colossal circular chamber, just far enough to suggest its outline. The wall bowed away into the distance, then back again, joining the darkness on the other side. Directly across the void, the flame caught on a darker absence, then another, and another. Openings. He narrowed his eyes and raised the lantern higher. One by one, the dark mouths of other passages came into view, spaced with unnerving regularity around the far side of the hall. As his arm moved, more appeared, until he could count dozens of them, all at the same height, all cut with the same clean edges. It was a pattern, not an accident. This wasn't a random cavern or a prospector's dig. The whole thing lay before him like the hub of a wheel, with those other tunnels for spokes. A designed, deliberate center in the heart of the rock. Kincaid eased a step closer to the precipice, then another, keeping one shoulder close to the curved wall. The lantern light clung to the stone here, revealing a surface that had been cut, not broken. Smooth, consistent, with only the faintest suggestion of tool work. It reminded him of blocks he'd seen in museum basements. Not because it was more advanced than anything in his day, but because it was unmistakably worked by intent, not by water or time. He ran his fingertips along the wall as he moved, letting the texture guide him more than his eyes. Stone, smooth stone, the occasional shallow groove. Then his hand caught something different. A sharp change in direction, a deliberate line. He stopped. Drawing the lantern in close, he leaned until the light grazed the wall at a tight angle. Lines resolved into shapes. First, a bird with a human head, its profile clean and familiar. Next to it, the outline of an eye. Then the sinuous curve of a serpent. Beyond them, more figures, marching away in ordered rows. His mind did what it had been trained to do. It reached for catalogs, for plates and Smithsonian reports, for the heavy reference volumes he'd turned through under gaslight in Washington. The shapes matched too easily. The bird-headed figure belonged on limestone pulled from Nile banks, not on sandstone hidden above an American river gorge. The eye, he had traced that same contour on artifacts shipped from a world away. The serpent flowed in the same stylized curve he'd seen on museum cases, labeled with dynastic dates and far-off desert coordinates. For a moment, he tried to force them into something else. Perhaps a miner had carved imitations from a book. But that would have meant an impossible amount of time, and the arrangement was wrong for idle graffiti. Perhaps they were some unknown local symbols he'd never encountered. Yet the proportions, the way the signs repeated and grouped, rang too closely to the script he knew. The rational part of his training kept offering escape routes. Misinterpretation, hoax, coincidence. Each one broke apart as his eyes moved along the wall. Line after line, The same formal pictorial language stared back at him, carved into a mountain in Arizona. He exhaled slowly, listening to the sound of his own breath being swallowed by the emptiness of the hall. The mental map he'd carried for years, where cultures belonged, where scripts were allowed to appear on the planet, no longer matched the rock directly under his hand. Later, when he tried to put it into the neutral language of a report, he would call them hieroglyphics, distinctly Egyptian in style. Standing there in the lantern's flicker, the words felt absurdly small for what they implied, and the carvings, as impossible as they were, felt less like a story and more like a heading. From where he stood at the rim of that vast circular chamber, Kincaid could see the pattern of the place now. This central hall is a hub, other passages radiating away like corridors in a designed complex. Some would open into rooms. Some, from their spacing and size, suggested storage or even workshops cut into the rock. The figures on the wall read like a label at the entrance to a library or an arsenal, a statement of who had claimed this space, and perhaps what it was for. Whatever lay inside those branching rooms and workshops would not just echo the symbols on the walls, it would give them weight, objects, devices, evidence that, if brought into the light, would press even harder against the version of history his employers, and everyone else, thought they understood. Kincaid's report didn't just fade into obscurity. It landed, with considerable weight, on a desk at the Smithsonian Institution. Enough weight that the institution answered with more than a letter. They sent a field team, official, funded, and led by one of their most respected archaeologists, Professor S.A. Jordan. His mandate, at least on paper, was simple. Take modern instruments into the canyon and either anchor Kincaid's story in measurable data or quietly put it to rest. They brought what Kincaid never had: precise surveying gear, tripods and optical levels, steel tapes, compasses, cameras, crates of sample jars. They established a base camp in the shadow of the same cliff face Kincaid had described. Jordan kept Kincaid's sketches and coordinates folded in his field notebook. The team moved in and out of the rock, shooting bearings, marking elevations, photographing each junction in the tunnels. For Kincaid, the labyrinth had been a maze lit by a single lantern. For Jordan, it became a set of plotted points and cross-sections that slowly resolved into something else. When they compiled their notes and instrument readings, the first conclusion was straightforward to write down and hard to absorb. This was not a natural cave system, but a planned, subterranean complex laid out with the regularity of a city. By the time Jordan's assistants finished estimating floor areas and chamber densities, the number they kept circling back to was the same. Room, on paper, for roughly 50,000 people. On the surface maps of that era, nothing in this stretch of the Southwest approached that population, and certainly not underground. There were no known supply roads drawn to it, no entries in any ethnographic record for a hidden metropolis carved into the canyon wall. A city of that size should have left footprints, trade, waste, stories. Here, the map was blank. If anyone at the Smithsonian ever assembled a full report of what came next, it would read less like an adventure story and more like a case file. Each chamber, another exhibit. Each artifact, another line that didn't fit. Exhibit 1 lay in a series of storage rooms off one of the primary corridors. In the beam of their lamps, shelves cut into the rock were lined with urns and vessels, ranked in careful rows. They were heavy even when empty, with a dull, reddish gold sheen. Walls thinner than their weight would suggest. Surfaces so smooth the usual tool marks were hard to find. Back at camp, Jordan had small fragments sent out with the next supply run for analysis. The result that came back was simple enough. A copper-gold alloy, hardened far beyond anything their comparative collections from the region could explain. local cultures in the known record worked softer native copper and simple hammered forms. This was something else entirely, recorded in the margin of one notebook as composition and temper, not matching any southwestern typology on file. In the tent where they logged each sample, the staff just passed the thin sherds from hand to hand, weighing them, trading quiet looks that said the metal in their fingers belonged to no chapter of the canyon's story they had been taught. Another set of rooms held what the team first cataloged simply as granaries, long chambers with raised platforms along the walls and a fine, pale dust underfoot. Sieving through that dust, the expedition's botanist began to lift out seeds, desiccated but intact. She separated them into packets, labeled each by chamber and depth, and that night spread a few of them out beside her field guide. Size, contour, surface, texture. On each point, they fell into patterns she already knew. Side by side with the printed illustrations, the match was too close to ignore. The same elongated forms, the same distinctive ridging she had only ever seen under headings tied to old world growing regions. Every reference she had on hand put those plants on the far side of an ocean, in climates separated from the Grand Canyon, not just by distance, but by the framework of accepted prehistory. In her log, the Latin names sit beside small, hesitant question marks. Deeper along the mapped axis of the complex, the architecture changed. The team entered a long, narrow hall, its ceiling low, its walls cut into continuous shelves. On those stone ledges lay bodies, row after row, each wrapped in a dark, fibrous cloth that flaked slightly when touched. The field descriptions noted the consistency. Same wrapping technique, same orientation of the bodies, hands placed in similar positions. A preliminary physical survey gave them 3 firm points. Every body unwrapped for sampling was male. Bone development and muscle attachments indicated adults in their prime years. Many skeletons carried healed fractures, forearms, ribs, collarbones, the kind of breaks seen in people who survive repeated impact. In the margin beside that list, someone added a single word: warriors. The room looked less like a crypt and more like a barracks, whose occupants had simply never been dismissed. As the survey map filled with pencil lines, one chamber kept drawing their attention. On the plan, it sat almost exactly at the geometric center of the complex, at the end of a main axis that ran through the city. When they reached it, the difference was immediate. A higher chamber, polished walls, no shelves or platforms, only a single stone pedestal. On that pedestal sat a dark stone statue, roughly human in size. The figure sat cross-legged, spine straight, feet resting on opposite thighs, a lotus flower in each hand. The face was calm, eyes half-lidded, mouth held in a small, steady softness. The outline would have been familiar to anyone who had ever seen an image of a Tibetan Buddha. Up close, the carving refused to stay in one tradition. Around the figure's neck ran a broad collar, incised with patterns Jordan knew from published plates of Egyptian jewelry. On the front of the pedestal, in narrow vertical bands, were symbols that matched no indigenous script from the canyon, but echoed forms, documented from tomb walls along the Nile. Reeds, birds, zigzag lines. Jordan had spent years staring at photographs of Egyptian artifacts in museum archives. He didn't need a reference sheet to trust what he was seeing. Taken separately, each element could have been dismissed. Together, they leaned hard in one direction. For an archaeologist trained in the Orthodox timeline, that shrine didn't just belong to a different site, it belonged to a different world. Tibetan-style posture, Egyptian-style symbols, advanced metalwork in the surrounding artifacts, all gathered in one engineered complex in the American Southwest. The accepted model said these cultures were separated by oceans and by centuries, with no verified contact, no shared projects. No way for a statue like this to be sitting a mile inside the rock of the Grand Canyon. On Jordan's map, the pillars of that model, population, trade, technology, religion, geography, were suddenly all under strain at once. You don't need anyone to spell out what that would do to the charts on a museum wall. In that chamber, the official story stopped being abstract and turned into something you could feel, pressing back. In that sense, the statue wasn't just another artifact. It was a verdict carved in stone, saying the map of our past is missing entire chapters. Jordan and his team hadn't just logged the find of a century. They had documented something the institutions above them had no language and no protocol for handling. And somewhere, maybe even before they left the canyon, that verdict started to look less like a discovery and more like a problem to be contained. By photographing it, sketching it, signing their names under those notes, they hadn't just found an impossible shrine. They had quietly signed the order for its disappearance. But for one brief, brilliant moment, the truth saw daylight. Not in a locked filing cabinet or a private letter, but in the loudest place a secret can land, the front page. It happened on April 5th, 1909. Front page, Arizona Gazette. You can almost feel the newsprint between your fingers, ink sharp, and across the top. Explorations in Grand Canyon. Not framed as folklore or tucked in the back as a curiosity, but as a straightforward report laying out stairways, granaries, idols. The subterranean citadel Kincaid had described, pinned to the page in calm detail. For anyone who had followed the rumors, it must have felt like the end of a lonely climb. At last, the thing he'd seen in the rock was out in the open. The world, on paper at least, would have to listen. Days later, another newspaper, the kind that prided itself on being the skeptical voice, ran its take. Not a correction, not a rebuttal, just a smirk in print. The Canyon City was treated like a frontier yarn, something you tell tourists. The word hoax never had to be spelled out. The discovery was nudged into the same drawer as tall tales. Once one respectable outlet laughed, it gave everyone else permission to stop taking the Gazette story seriously. When you can't answer a claim, it's easier to make people feel foolish for believing it. Behind both papers sat the one name the Gazette had put in black and white, the Smithsonian Institution, Kincaid's own employer. The body the article said had sent Professor S.A. Jordan to verify the find. Over the years, curious readers and researchers did the obvious thing. They asked the Smithsonian what had become of that expedition. The reply has been remarkably consistent. They possess no records of such an expedition, no artifacts from any Grand Canyon citadel, no employee ever by the name of Professor S.A. Jordan, no G.E. Kincaid on their rolls. That same flat answer has been repeated, in one form or another, for decades. Sit with that for a moment. An entire party of men and a site detailed in a front-page article. All reduced, officially, to nothing at all. For anyone who spends nights piecing together lost stories, this is the moment the floor drops out. You follow the trail to the doors of that museum, and on the other side, the record simply doesn't exist. The denial is so complete that it almost becomes its own kind of truth. A truth written not in documents and artifacts, but in blank catalog entries and empty archive boxes. On paper, the story fades. Out in the canyon itself, the silence hardens into something physical. The stretch of rock where the Gazette placed Kincaid's discovery falls inside a federally controlled off-limits zone, one of those spaces the official maps shade and label in dry language. In accounts written decades later, you start to hear the same detail repeated. Whoever managed that ground didn't just close the area, They closed the hole itself. The entrance to the cavern was sealed. Some say collapsed, others blasted, until it was once again just uninterrupted canyon wall. Somewhere beyond that lost opening lay one more barrier, the one Professor Jordan wrote about and refused to disturb. A stone door that exhaled what he called a deadly snaky smell. The phrase sticks under your skin. You can almost see the lantern light catching the rock as the men edge close, smell something sharp and coiling, and stop. Jordan's order was simple. Leave it sealed. Do not touch it. And now, if the rumors of a buried entrance are true, that door is nested behind tons of rock and a century of institutional silence. They didn't just hide a city. They locked away its questions, its wonders, and its terrors in the same gesture. That's the quiet cruelty of a true erasure. You don't just lose the answer, you lose the ability to stand in front of the question at all. That instinct to bury what doesn't fit the map, to seal the uncomfortable question deep inside stone, didn't die in 1909. It just became more efficient. If you listen closely to the official silences now, you can still feel that pressure at work, in places you'd never think to look, in mountains that breathe. The instinct to bury a truth so deep it can never be found isn't just an artifact of the past. It's a living practice, built into the mountains. One of those mountains sits on the border of Pennsylvania and Maryland, above a quiet town called Blue Ridge Summit. For generations, people who live there, people who work the land, have spoken of something strange. A farmer out in his field at dusk feels it under his feet. It's not a sound you hear with your ears. It's a feeling, a low-frequency vibration that comes up through the ground, through the soles of your feet. A steady, deep hum you can feel in your chest, a reminder that something is alive down there. They have a name for it. They say the mountain is breathing. You learn to live with that if you grow up there. Parents tell their kids it's just machinery somewhere, or some quirk in the rock. Neighbors repeat the story with a half smile, but no one can explain why the hum shows up on windless nights, when the roads are empty and the fields are quiet. On most maps, the mountain is nothing special. Contour lines and a name. On other, more restricted charts, those same slopes are labeled differently. The ink there spells out the official designation: Raven Rock Mountain Complex. Site R. To the intelligence community, it has a simpler, more direct name: the Underground Pentagon. That label answers one question and opens several more. The charts mark a facility, but they don't show how far it runs into the granite, how many levels drop beneath the tree line, or how much is still blacked out in classified files. They don't say why a small town can feel its mountain vibrate without ever being invited to see what's moving. At the dawn of the Cold War, under President Truman, a nuclear attack on Washington, D.C. became something planners had to assume. Behind closed doors, they asked a blunt question. If the capital vanished in a flash of light, who gives the next order? Who speaks for the country? The answer was a secret directive, folded into a larger continuity of government program. Quietly, it redrew the idea of where the United States could be governed from. At its heart was the construction of a massive, fortified, self-sustaining city buried deep inside a mountain of granite. A hidden duplicate of the nerve center of American military power, a place where the Pentagon's command structure could relocate in minutes and survive the unthinkable. A sealed world with its own power, water, and air. For 50 years, that is what Raven Rock was. A theory. A ghost city waiting for a ghost. A doomsday machine built for a day everyone prayed would never come. It sat there in the dark, while life in Blue Ridge Summit went on above, as if it were just stone. And then, on a clear Tuesday morning in September 2001, the theory became real. For the people living in the shadow of Raven Rock, the theory became real with a sound. It began on the morning of September 11, 2001, as a distant tremor in the air, a vibration Hal Neal felt in his ribs before he could name it. Hal set his coffee down, wiped his palm on his shirt, and stepped to the front door, one hand on the frame as he leaned into the growing noise. Then he saw them. 5 helicopters, dark against the sky, coming in lower than any flight he'd watched. They weren't angling to pass over town. Noses pointed straight at the cut in the mountain, where the locals joked the rock breathed. As they crossed the houses, the rotor wash bent the treetops and sent grit skittering along the pavement at Hal's feet. A shadow crossed his porch as the last helicopter passed. Across the street, a neighbor stepped out, mug halfway to her lips. She didn't wave. She just tracked the helicopters with her eyes until they slipped behind the tree line and dropped toward the far side of the ridge, toward the hidden doors everyone had heard about and few had seen. The sound changed. A minute later, Hal heard tires on asphalt. Down the hill, a line of black SUVs swung off the main road and onto the access lane toward the fence line. They didn't slow for the stop sign. They took the bend in one smooth motion, gravel spitting from under the wheels and pattering into the drainage ditch. Their windows were so dark he saw only his own porch reflected back. No sirens, no horns, just the low, coordinated growl of engines climbing toward the mountain, the kind of sound that made people step back from the curb without knowing why. More doors opened up and down the street. A kid on a bike rolled to the edge of a driveway and just stopped, one foot on the ground, watching the convoy disappear between the trees. One man down the block didn't look at the road at all. He looked straight past it, at the mouth of the valley where the access road vanished into the rock. Nobody said much. A few quiet curses, a half-whispered, "You seeing this?" carried across the yards. The old joke about the breathing mountain, something inside Raven Rock alive and waiting, didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt less like a story and more like a machine waking up under their feet. From the outside, all Hal had were those signs. Helicopters vanishing into the ridge, convoys swallowed by trees, a faint vibration lingering in the floorboards. Later, when official language finally caught up to what they had seen, he would learn its name. This was the first real-world activation of the continuity of government plan, a Cold War protocol imagined for the day the surface might not be there anymore. Raven Rock had been built for that scenario, a hardened complex carved into granite, with its own power, water, and air. On September 11th, it stopped idling. Inside, generators took the load, blast doors slid into place, and corridors that usually held its skeleton crew began to fill with officers and staffers, carrying pieces of a government meant to survive underground. Down in the town, people like Hal could only guess what that meant. He went back inside eventually, like everyone else, to the flicker of the television, the collapsing towers, the smoke over the Pentagon. The same kind of helicopters he had just watched disappear into Raven Rock were now on the screen, lifting officials away from burning buildings as news anchors repeated phrases like secure location and continuity. In the days that followed, more details surfaced. High-level officials, including the vice president at the time, Dick Cheney, had been pulled from the chaos in Washington and flown to hardened command centers. Raven Rock, a quiet line on Hal's horizon, was suddenly part of that network, a nerve center for a superpower in crisis, drawing the lines of authority off the public charts and deep beneath the granite. That should have been the whole story, a secret base doing what it was built to do. Instead, declassified files mention observations that don't fit. Not hijacked planes or fighter jets, but something unidentified in those same Pennsylvania skies, watching as the nation's leaders disappeared into the mountain. This wasn't a rumor. It sits in an official file, declassified under the Freedom of Information Act, case number 97, F1697. The year is 1976. The location is Fort Ritchie, the post whose military police guard the perimeter of Raven Rock. On paper, the document looks like any other incident report. A date, a place, the officers on duty, short numbered paragraphs written in clipped, passive language. Nothing in the formatting warns you that, in the middle of all that bureaucracy, someone has calmly typed the words, 3 oblong glowing objects hovering over one of the most secret facilities in the country. Read slowly, you can trace what happened. Military police on perimeter duty report an initial sighting in the sky above the facility. Then the description settles on 3 objects, oblong, glowing, hanging in the air over Raven Rock. The language stays matter-of-fact. It notes their position, that they lingered over the ammunition storage area, and that they made no sound at all. A strange detail to find, in a place built around machinery and engines. The officers check, confer, watch. An entry records that the base's own military systems were, in their words, unresponsive. All of this is happening at the heart of America's most secret and powerful defense installation. And on the page, all anyone does is watch and write it down. The strangeness around Raven Rock isn't only in the sky above it. To reach the interior, you pass a set of blast doors weighing roughly 30 tons each. The files give you the number, but weight like that is easier to feel than to read. A slab of steel that size doesn't simply swing shut. It moves with a slow, final momentum that you can almost hear, a deep mechanical closing. On one side of that threshold is open air. On the other, whatever the government has decided must survive at any cost. Step through, and you're no longer in a hillside bunker. You're inside something closer to a sealed ship, built to outlast the storm. Most people, if they picture a bunker, imagine a tunnel carved straight into stone. Raven Rock's core does not look like that. Inside the hollowed-out mountain, the internal plans describe 5 separate buildings, each 3 stories tall, freestanding. Not rows of cramped corridors, but full structures with their own walls and floors, arranged like a small city dropped into a cavern. It is designed so that offices, communications hubs, living quarters could all be stacked and hidden there. If you could stand there, you'd see facades and stairwells and the suggestion of windows, facing rock instead of sky. It's the kind of layout that makes you forget for a moment that you are still inside a mountain built for the end of the world. On its own, a secret city inside a mountain would be enough. The architects added one more line. In the official description, those 5 3-story buildings are not anchored to the floor of the cavern. They are, in the words of the plans, floating on massive industrial springs and shock absorbers. It isn't a metaphor. The entire underground city rests on a suspension system, engineered so that, if a nuclear blast slammed into the mountain, the rock could take the impact, while the structures inside flexed and swayed just enough to stay standing. The people, the communications, the chain of command, everything that mattered, would ride out the shock on steel and coiled metal. A system like that, together with whatever machinery keeps a buried complex running, would have another side effect. It turns the mountain into an instrument. Local stories talk about a low, persistent vibration, a hum, around Raven Rock, and some people have said the mountain seems to breathe. The documents don't confirm a cause, but once you know there is a whole city down there, literally riding on springs, it's hard not to hear those reports in a different tone. A city hidden in a canyon, an entire complex of buildings floating on springs inside a mountain. We uncover pieces like this, and it feels, for a moment, like we've reached the bottom of the file. UFOs over a Doomsday bunker, blast doors measured in tons, a hidden city balanced on shock absorbers, surrounded by the faint mechanical hum that has become part of the mountain's legend. It's easy to believe this must be the heart of the story, the place where the maps finally show their last marked point. Look a little deeper with me. All of this is still on land. It's carved into mountains, tucked into valleys, drawn somewhere on charts and blueprints. These are the parts of the chart they let us see. The rest of the page, the unmarked water, waits below. The main text of our planet's hidden story, the part that might explain why secrets stack on secrets like this, is in the one place our maps are still almost blank. It is still underwater. For a moment, let's look at the charts that define our world. We trace the faint lines of secrets hidden in the continents, a canyon in Arizona, a mountain in Pennsylvania. But this is not where the map is truly empty. The grid lines and soft blue shading give us an illusion of a world known, a planet charted. It feels complete, even where the data is little more than guesswork. The truth is that our knowledge of the seafloor is astonishingly thin. A 2025 study in the journal Science Advances went back through every deep-sea dive ever made. Its conclusion was simple and brutal. We have visually imaged less than 0.001% of the deep-sea floor. An area roughly the size of Rhode Island is all we have ever truly seen of that foundation. The rest is not blank, but reconstructed indirectly, from tiny variations in Earth's gravity sensed by satellites, and from narrow sonar tracks left by ships that crossed a point only once. Between those lines, scientists interpolate and smooth, guessing at an entire basin from a handful of shadows. And what of the maps themselves? According to the GEBCO Seabed 2030 project, only about 27% of the global seafloor has been mapped to a modern high-resolution standard. Pull up that global bathymetric map, and it doesn't look like the tidy atlas on a classroom wall. It looks more like a negative, ribbons of detail snaking along shipping lanes and coastlines, surrounded by vast swaths, rendered as soft, featureless blur. Entire stretches of ocean dissolve into smoothed-over shades of blue, where mountains, trenches, and cliffs must exist, but remain indistinct. Often, we can trace scars and ridges on Mars and the Moon, more clearly than we can trace the shape of our own abyss, a reversal that says less about the ocean's emptiness than about where we have chosen to point our instruments. Those blurred zones are not just cartographic noise. They are unwritten chapters in the official map of the world. This profound ignorance is not accidental, not simply the price we pay for the ocean's depth and pressure. The pattern of exploration makes that clear. About 65% of all deep-sea observations have occurred within the waters of just 3 nations: the United States, Japan, and New Zealand. Those are countries with large research fleets and navies, with dense cables on their seabeds, fisheries to manage, and potential resources to survey. Our light follows funding lines and strategic concerns, hugging coastlines, trade routes, and test ranges, while most of the open ocean remains in the dark. And the largest archives of what is known do not sit in public scientific repositories. The most comprehensive seafloor databases are held within military institutions like the U.S. Navy and have historically been kept classified. Security rules, not scientific curiosity, decide which of those soundings ever leave the vaults. The result is a split map. Detailed charts for those who operate under clearance, and a coarser, stitched-together seafloor for everyone else. The map is incomplete, not because the technology does not exist, but because the highest resolution views are concentrated where they serve defense and national interests, and seldom reach the public. The stories from the Grand Canyon and Raven Rock were about secrets that were actively buried, documents redacted, tunnels sealed, entrances hidden behind rock and steel. The greatest secrets of our history may not need that kind of cover-up at all. They may simply lie in wait, submerged in the vast, dark, and officially overlooked expanse where no camera has ever passed. Whatever is written across that unmapped terrain is absent from our textbooks, our timelines, and our sense of where history has unfolded. It sits in the 99.99% of the deep world our eyes have never seen. The Grand Canyon, Raven Rock, and the deep ocean are just 3 examples. In your opinion, what part of our world still holds the most profound, undiscovered secret? Share your thoughts below.